Okay, well, now I've got David Cretney MLC. Thank you very much for agreeing to meet me today. I thought, well, I know I'm going to sort of move on to obviously the main reason I've asked you, which is to do with the recent sort of discussions in Ledgeco. But I thought there's a quick point that I've discussed with Chris and Kate this morning as well. I thought I'd just put it to you just to see what you think, really. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about local authorities and about the problems that they've got with getting enough people to stand. I've had a conversation with somebody else this week, a young lady in Ballabeg, and she sort of made this comment just, in part of a discussion that we were having, that she would have stood, but she's got young children and she's got very, and it just didn't mesh. She felt she didn't want to make that commitment and not be able to sort of do it. So it just sort of, I thought that's quite an interesting situation, because you've got, a situation which appears that the system is failing. You've got not enough people standing. And then you've got somebody like her, and I think she's quite representative of a modern young family. She wants to be involved. She has an opinion. She has, she's an interest in her local community. In my mind, as we were just saying just before I started, it seems very simple. That, she's got an opinion and she can make this. She can be involved in these decisions. She can be, but the system isn't letting her. And we thought, well, is there a way that could be meshed? Not necessarily completely get rid of the existing system, but mesh in some way of allowing her. And obviously, in my mind, it's digitally. I thought, well, yeah, digital. She could just be. Find a way to allow. I thought, well, what do you think about that sort of idea and Chris sort of his sort of take on it was, well, his sort of feeling on it is, well, they shouldn't be involved directly in decisions as such, because he actually has the opinion that local authorities should be more focused on policy and allow the actual staff, professionals, to make decisions in an objective way, and whatever objective is. But fundamentally, there should be a local sort of decision-making process in some form, whether it's directly on actions or whether it's on policy. What do you think about there being a more open way?
Okay. Well, my view would be that local authority reform was long overdue. When the Council of Ministers backed out of it some years ago, I took a resolution to Tynwald to reduce the number of local authorities. I think 22 local authorities for a population of 85,000+ people is far too many. In the case you describe, some of the rural authorities meet in the evenings, so I would have thought that would be easier for a young person with family commitments to be able to attend such meetings. In Douglas, for example, a number of the meetings take place in the daytime, and I've spoken to young people, because I want to see more young people involved. I've spoken to young people in those, and they just can't get the time if one partner is out at work and the other one has childcare commitments. They just can't get the time. So
that was my sort of thinking on it, really, is that there's never going to be a right time for everybody, and ideally you want a complete cross section in every local authority. You want older people, professional people, family people, business people. And I thought, well, there's no need to completely wipe the slate clean, but you could get that cross section much easier by having some way that digital inclusion would mesh into that. So that if people could be more, and then it would allow them to fit it into the rest of their lives. That whenever they had a half hour, they could read through something and make their opinion known without having to go and sit in it. You don't have to get rid of the meetings completely. Yeah. But somebody like her. Yeah. She could be much more directly involved. She has an opinion. She's often discussing it online. There's only one break in that process where that opinion and discussion online becomes actually relevant to the. Yeah. So in theory, in principle, you that sort of level of inclusion you're quite sort of keen on.
Yes, absolutely. What I would say is that doesn't just apply to local authorities. I think that applies equally to Tynwald. It needs to have a diverse makeup of members. Some people very often say what we require is a Tynwald which consists of business people. I think there needs to be a broad spectrum of the island's population members. People also say that legislative council should consist of lawyers or people with a legal background. Again, I'm not convinced. I think sometimes experience in a parliamentary setting can assist in that. Yeah. But back to the point you make, the role of elected members is one of policy setting, and then it's for the officials to carry that out. So there's no reason why there couldn't be more work and transactions carried out in the manner you describe, as I see it.
Well, I think I think everybody would see that as very logical. In any sort of decision-making group, ideally you do want a lawyer and a businessman, but you want the spectrum, because somebody else can be seeing it from a completely different angle.
Yes.
You need the legal reality of it, or whatever the practicality of it, the decision you're going to make, but you also need different opinions as to how that,
Well, it reflects the makeup of the island's population,
Yes.
and that's how it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for that.
problem.
What we'll do is I'll reset the camera now and we'll go for another question.
Okay.
So moving on then to the main reason I sort of got in touch with you day before last. Obviously, Alf's bill has gone to Legco, and you've made some public statements on it, and there's been a lot of discussion on it. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen next? What do you think should happen next? I mean, or start a bit for what went wrong in the first place.
I don't know what went wrong with the answer. I felt that this was a relatively simple move in the right direction, because for me, those members of the House of Keys who are going out to meet the public in the months ahead, the House of Keys has primacy over the Legislative Council. Legislative Council is a revising body first and foremost, a scrutinising body, rather than a body which should be used for this purpose, in my opinion. And so I was quite content when Alf asked me if I would bring it to the Legislative Council. I had a conversation with Mike Coleman, who, as you know, in the end, everybody other than the Bishop opposed the bill, but Mike agreed to second, so that it was there and it could be discussed. I'm very disappointed. I think even though there's a more in-depth review taking place, which I've certainly welcomed, which Chris Thomas moved in the June 2015 Tynwald, I certainly welcome that, because for a long time it's been politically led and hasn't got anywhere. I've been in a number of committees looking at the makeup of Tynwald, looking at the Legislative Council, whether it should be more democratic, and we've got nowhere. Despite what everybody says, oh yes, we're all in support of, it's gone nowhere. And so to have an independent person conducting the review, I think is a good thing. I think his timescale is pretty tight. He's going to be on the island either this month and next, and then to report to the, it's either June or July. I think it's June.
July, I think it is.
Right, July.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things that I asked Chris. One of the things that I'd sort of misunderstood in essence is that my concern was: is there an avenue for the public to speak to this person? Because it's one thing, he's a sort of professional assessment of the process.
Yeah.
But like we were just saying a minute ago, you want the people's perspective on the process, and
it is.
Apparently, it is open, and people. So this is my, we actually, Chris mentioned you in so much as that you don't want to feel like this process is going to go through, and he's going to make some recommendations, and then it's going to be put in file number 9 and forgotten about. So I said, well, how is this? And obviously his sort of point was, ideally the public need to push this. If this review comes back and he makes some really good recommendations, the public need to make their will known.
Absolutely.
Push. In order to ensure that it's not just put in the long grass for another 5 years.
Well, I would really be more than disappointed if that were to be the case, because everybody, Legislative Council, House of Keys, and I believe a substantial number of the public, want to see some change. Now, the reason it hasn't happened thus far is, as I described, I think, because it's been politically led, and there are a number of different things that have been looked at, and for whatever reason they get bogged down. We've now got a truly independent person. He's a member of the House of Lords, Lord Lisvane, and I do hope, with his experience, that members won't have an excuse to be able to put it in the long grass, because he'll be doing a thorough review, and I think it's timely, and I do hope that, we'll see, but I do hope that Tynwald has the maturity to accept what he puts on.
So ideally, in terms of actually what we can do is, look at whatever comes out of it, and then people get behind it, either an e-petition or just making your voice a bit more heard.
Well, in advance of that, he'll be inviting the public to make comments about what their views are on the present system, what they think could be better for the future. That's been said. He's going to engage with the public and with the political members.
So going back a step then, what do you think? I mean, as I understand it, there is the procedure now for Alf's bill is that it's effectively a delaying tactic. There is a standing orders procedure that can force it through in effect. So it's not totally dead, but is it going to just be pushed out into the long grass and forgotten about until after this, or is it?
I think so. I think for me, I think it's gone. I mean, it would be a pointless exercise to bring it back in the short term to a legislative council who've already made their point. I think there's a 6-month process where it could be brought back, but that takes us outside of the times in terms of the election that's coming up.
And a couple of things just discussed with Chris. Chris is talking about basically proposing a change to have both houses sitting together or voting together.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
In principle, I'm in favour of that. We'll see what the debate is. Yeah. That's next week. I think you know, the end of the day, the House of Keys is the powerhouse. That's they're the directly elected branch. The role of Legislative Council, even though I'm a member of Legislative Council, I've gone there because I'm a reformer. I want to see change. I want to see it become more democratic. And also, I think there may well be some changes after the election, and I hope that I might be able to help any newer members when they start off. So, I'll be I think, as things stand at the moment, I'll be supporting Chris's move because for me, the House of Keys is the predominant chamber. And
then he's also considering, I think he's considering a motion later in the year to have all voting members directly elected.
Yes.
What do you think about that sort of idea?
Well, the Manx Labour Party policy for a long time, there's been some discussion this week about why the two members of the Manx Labour Party had different views on this. Well, that was simply because we don't have a policy at present in relation to members of the House of Keys being the people who vote in the Chief Minister. What we do have a policy about, though, is about more democratic election. And for me, more democratic election means all members being accountable to the public.
So you're in favour, in principle, and in favour of that?
Yes,
oh,
yes.
Fantastic. Well, that's very good to hear. There's at least one voice in there. I mean, I suppose the impression given is that the rest of them aren't going to take to this.
Well, I think it all depends, in the end, that the discussions revolve around whether then the Legislative Council becomes the powerhouse. If everybody's elected and they have a larger mandate and stuff, which is kind of what happens in Jersey. Jersey have senators.
Senate system,
That's right. And as such, they then seem to be the more important people because they have a larger mandate. And so lots of discussion in the past has been about, well, that will be taken away from the historic primacy of the House of Keys and given it to the Legislature. Whatever way it's...
we've got to find a way forward.
Absolutely.
History's great, but you don't want to sort of be stuck in a hole just because you like history.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.
It's a pleasure.
And hopefully we can do another one later in the year.
Love to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cretney.
Nice to see you.
Take care now.